Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share, and subscribe.
A teacher often serves as a role model for his students. His morality, social conscience, manners, intelligence, personality, emotional savvy, and depth and breadth of knowledge are always on display. If these are all exemplary, he or she gains his students' respect, admiration, and reverence in the hearts. My name is Patty, and I am 17 years old. I am in my senior year at a prestigious secondary school renowned for having excellent teachers in all subjects. I'm so proud of my school because they use modern, creative ways to teach in class. When I tell my friends about my school, they, being in lesser quality schools, usually don't believe me. One of our teachers recently gave birth to a new baby and took maternity leave, so our school had to hire a substitute teacher to cover her class in her absence. When he entered our classroom for the first time, we were awestruck by how handsome, intelligent, and elegant he was. All the girls adored him, including myself. I would rarely hear most of his explanations because I would be so focused on his enchanted eyes. Soon, I noticed that he liked me too. I wanted to know more about him, so I explored his Facebook page and concocted silly reasons to need to speak with him. We chatted on numerous occasions. During one such chat, he spontaneously asked me to send him my photo, but I was instantly uneasy with that request. It raised a red flag with me. It seemed creepy and inappropriate. I used the excuse that my mom had forbidden me from sending my picture on my phone, and was shocked when he took offense at my declining to do as he asked. He threatened me, saying that if I didn't send him nude pictures of myself, that he would use Photoshop to create such pictures of me and send them around the school. I was dumbfounded, numb, fearful. I told him we could meet tomorrow and talk some more. He warned me not to tell anyone about our relationship, or else he would ruin my life. I promptly made screenshots of all our previous conversations. I resolved to always turn on my voice recorder app each time right before we would meet again. I succeeded in making him feel relaxed enough that he spoke freely about his feelings and desires. Then I excused myself at some point and told him I had to go home because Mom had wanted me home to go somewhere with her. Instead, I went straight to the police station and told them about this substitute teacher and his indecent requests of me and his threat about ruining my life. I let them listen to our recorded conversations. They said that other students had complained about him before too, but they hadn't been able to get the concrete evidence that I had assembled. He had repeated this routine on different teenage students in several states. When he failed to return to school after I talked to the police that afternoon, I was the only one who knew what had happened to him.
He was a dream, the future, or so I thought. But my love was cursed right from the start. Sounds a bit confusing, right? Let me explain. But first, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Carolyn. I was a dreamer. I dreamed of a good, warm, stable, successful life. I wanted a good job. And I wanted to travel around the world a bit with Helen. She was my best friend. We virtually shared the same dreams, and hobbies, and interests, and lifestyles. We've been friends since we were kids. People often thought that we were sisters. I did too, in fact. She even got jealous if anyone tried to get close to me. Every day, Helen and I worked a little more towards our dreams. Once, when Helen and I were traveling with some of our friends, we had a problem with the hostess on the plane. A gentleman intervened and cleverly solved our problems. His name was Danny. I liked him. A lot. I thought about him often. But whenever I talked to Helen about him, she told me that he was not as amazing as I seemed to think he was. Coincidentally, I met him again at a party of a mutual friend. We talked together till daylight. I told Helen about our encounter, and she expressed her wishes that my love story would have a happy ending. I similarly told her that I hoped she would find the love of her life someday too. Everything would be okay, we figured. Then, one day, I received a letter in our mailbox. It was in weird handwriting, as if the writer had written it with a trembling hand. I opened it curiously. It said that my love for Danny would become a curse if I didn't give him up and get him out of my life. What nonsense, I thought. Whose idea of a silly joke was this? I immediately called Danny and Helen to tell them about the letter. Danny laughed, but Helen was worried and suggested that I should be careful from now on. That same day, Danny had a horrible car accident, but fortunately he wasn't hurt. A detective investigating the case determined that his car brakes had been tampered with. In another incident, a car almost hit me, but it swerved away at the last minute. When I mentioned this incident to Danny, he tried to calm me down and told me to just forget about it. He gave me a beautiful bracelet as a present and proposed. We got engaged, and I couldn't have been happier. I wanted to show the bracelet to Helen, but somehow I seemed to have lost it. I couldn't find it anywhere. Anyway, when I told Helen about his proposal, she was thrilled for me. I spent days shopping for just the right wedding dress. I was so busy with preparations that I forgot all about the ominous letter. I went to the wedding hall early to make sure that everything was ready and prepared. Helen was helping me, and Danny kept calling me to make sure I was all right. Suddenly, the lights went out. I called out to Helen, worried that she might have tripped and fallen when the lights were out. When the lights came back on, Helen had fainted, and my dress had disappeared. I screamed to the ceiling, "What do you want from me? Leave me alone!" Suddenly, Danny appeared out of nowhere and asked me what had happened. I told him then and there that we must break off our engagement, otherwise the curse the letter mentioned might injure someone or cause someone to die. Then Helen came to and tried to calm me down. She told me to go to the car and that she would get our stuff and follow me. I loved Danny and wanted to marry him, but now I was seriously worried that this curse threat might actually be real. Helen came back carrying a bag and a large suitcase and told Danny not to worry, that she would drive me home and then call him to tell him that we had arrived safely. I was still crying, and Helen was trying to calm me down. When we arrived home, I noticed something strange. Helen was carrying a bag that was partially open, and I glimpsed a piece of clothing stuffed into it. It looked exactly like my dress. I opened the bag and found that it was my dress. I confronted Helen and demanded to know how my missing dress ended up in her bag. I clearly caught her red-handed, and she was unable to answer coherently. I realized at that moment that the source of the so-called curse was Helen. "Helen," I said, "how dare you do this to me? I thought we were like sisters to each other." She replied icily, with a glare that I saw for the first time. She said that she fell in love with Danny just as I did, but he chose me instead of her, and that she hated me for it. She said she won him over and got him to love her instead. Then they both tried to scare me into calling off the wedding so that she and Danny could be together. There are no words to describe how I felt at the time. I replied in a similar tone. I told her that I don't ever want to see her again, or Danny. Neither of them mattered anymore. I never did see Helen or Danny after that day. I'm on a Caribbean island now, sipping on a cocktail. I read in the paper that Danny and Helen had announced their engagement. I'm thinking about what wedding present I should give them as a surprise.
A suspicious mind can be a gift or a curse, depending on how a person uses it. Lend me your ears and listen to my story. My name is Sasha, and I am 21 years old. I have a suspicious mind. I see an Indian behind every tree. I suspect anyone and everyone of having ulterior motives and designs. If anyone makes any claim, I will research it to determine its veracity. If anyone looks at me, my mind goes through 10 different scenarios of what scheme that person is plotting to take advantage of me. I trust no one. So as you might imagine, I don't have many friends, and I've never had a boyfriend. I just naturally assume all people are two-faced scalawags. So without further ado, I will tell you that one day I was dumbfounded when I realized that I was falling in love with my neighbor Brandon. He was a weird, introverted guy who looked and behaved just like a vampire. Data gathering, you know. I noticed that I never saw him in the daylight, only at nighttime when he went to work. Like me, he didn't have many friends, and he didn't speak much. Everyone I knew agreed that he was definitely a weirdo. but there was something about him I liked. He was my cup of tea. I explored his Facebook page and concocted silly reasons to need to talk to him. We would meet and chat on numerous occasions, and I discovered that he liked me and was watching me too. He asked me to marry him one day, and I accepted immediately. It was difficult persuading my family that he was an okay guy, but I managed to convince them. I felt that he had a mysterious streak in his character, some dark secret in his life. But I was attracted to that and was okay with it. We prepared for our wedding reception. I did errands in the mornings and he did errands in the evenings. Then the night actually, came when we got married. As we spent more time together, I noticed that Brandon seemed very sensitive to bright lights. If any place were too well lit, he would make up an excuse and ask to leave. I noticed that his face was always pale. I noticed that his room at home had only a small lamp, and he liked his steaks exceedingly rare and bloody. Whenever he happened to see an injury, he would gaze hungrily at the oozing blood, just like I've seen in vampire movies. I truly wondered if he might be an actual vampire. One day I walked into his room, and when he looked up and saw me, his smile was creepy and eerie. I teased him and asked him not to hurt me, and he smiled. He offered to tell me a secret if I promised not to tell anyone. He told me that he had been hiding a dark secret for a long time, and he longed to share it with me. I held my breath. It was coming. He was going to confess to being a vampire. I was crestfallen when he instead told me that he had a rare illness that accounted for his pale face and rendered him sensitive to light. He said he was tired of keeping the secret to himself and felt relieved to have someone to share it with. I hugged him crying and told him that I didn't mind at all. And here I was so sure my husband was a vampire. Am I insane or what?
Hi there. I'm Andrew and I'm 23 years old. I'm a student in a medical college. I'm studying to become a doctor because it's my lifelong dream to find a cure for cancer. I want to save people's lives from the scourge of this disease. This war became personal for me when my mom fell victim to it. Mom fainted one day and we took her to a doctor who took some x-rays and diagnosed that she had lung cancer. Eventually, she succumbed to it and passed away. After that, I swore that I would find a cure for this hateful, evil curse on mankind. I began researching every book I could find on the subject, including old medical texts and foreign research papers and journals. One ancient tomb I perused mentioned a little-known, rare herb that grows high in the Himalayan mountains in China that was said to be able to reverse the effects of cancer damage. Heartened by this discovery, I set up a small expedition to go find said herb no matter the effort and no matter the cost. I completed my preparations and enlisted the help of one of my colleagues. The journey to the base of the mountains was tiring and difficult, and the trek up the mountainside was long and arduous. Once we reached the Tibetan plateau, we began searching for this rare, wondrous herb. We queried the members of a local nomadic tribe living there for clues. Luckily, their old shaman was familiar with the herb and told us where to look. Following his directions, we found it at long last. But finding it was only part of the battle. We returned home to my lab. I then had to see if I could extract a cure from it. The research and testing would take time, money, and effort. After months and months of experimentation and trials, suffering failure after failure, I ultimately achieved success by sheer persistence and luck. I formulated a cure for cancer in my lab. What a momentous day for humanity this was. I couldn't wait to publicize my findings in the medical journals and tell the world that cancer had finally been conquered. Then just 2 days later, I received a mysterious phone call from an unknown person with a gravelly voice who threatened me with death if I were to publicize my findings. I was shocked that someone would want to block a cure for cancer at the expense of millions of cancer deaths in the years to come. And so, here I stand in my lab, unafraid and unswayed. I will publish my findings, and I will let the world know about this miracle cure. If my life should prove to be the cost of saving posterity from the continuing ravages of cancer, then so be it. I will gladly pay that cost.